What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Mets PostGame Show right here on the channel and on X. And it was a perfect storm of bullshit. That's the only words I can think of. Couldn't come up with any fancy. Just that. The Brewers actually came to play with their bench and beat the Reds, who are not a good team, who are officially making the playoffs because the Mets are incompetent and also are not a good team. Season over, choke complete, no playoffs. For the highest payroll in baseball, multiple guys having career years offensively, and the New York Mets could not find a way just to win a couple of games over the last couple of months. It has completely and utterly been a disaster. And the reason why there is nothing on this screen other than the final score in game 162 and David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza. And those three phrases: season over, choke complete, no playoffs. It is an utter disaster. This was put together by David Stearns. This roster was put together by David Stearns. I said it from day one. The roster construction was not good. Making a roster where you spent a ton of money bringing back Pete Alonso, bringing on board Juan Soto. You added Juan Soto to the core. And you went cheap in every other aspect of your team. You brought back a cheap DH in Jesse Winker. You brought Frankie Montas here. You brought Griffin Cannon here. You brought back Sean Manaea on a pretty cheap deal, considering that he pitched well last year, but nobody takes short-term deals unless you're not a good pitcher. Nobody was jumping over, hoops to line up to sign Sean Manaea. David Stearns knew that, so he had Sean Manaea in the bag. Sean Manaea wanted to come back, so he tried as little as possible to spend on the pitching staff, from the rotation to the bullpen. He just signed all one-year deals for bullpens, a broken down AJ Minter. He brought back a broken Brooks Raley, who was really good, but again, these are all one-year deals. You traded for all rentals in your bullpen. And what you do is waste another year of Pete Alonso, waste another 30-30 year from Francisco Lindor, waste a career high in home runs from Brandon Nimmo, and damn good numbers for Juan Soto. That's what you wasted. And I keep on coming back all the time and saying it. You cannot waste these years of guys like that. And when you constantly bullshit a trade deadline, when you know what you need, but you don't do enough, you end up costing you. You had a game 162 that you couldn't trust your starting pitcher in Sean Manaea, your ace, that you paid $25 million to. $25 million. And you take him out in an inning and 2/3? Now, I'm not blaming Mendoza on this part. You know why? Because I felt like this was all David Stearns. I truly feel that. Now, Mendoza has a lot of blame during the season. I completely understand that. But Mendoza was jumpy. He was clearly managing like his life depended on it. He managed very urgently, and there was no room for error. No room for error. But you know what, Dolo? Why did they yank Manaea early? Because in that inning, he put two men on. This is a guy in Manaea that gave you no reason to trust him at any moment this year. So in Mendoza's case, he was between a rock and a hard place. Either you leave Manaea in and he gives up runs, or you put every guy that you can possibly trust out of your bullpen out there. Like, I wasn't on board with taking out Manaea. I'd rather let Manaea die. You gave him the most money to be your ace. I would have left him out there. I would have let him out. I would have let him out there to dry in that inning. You know what? Let him try to get that final out, or he gives up runs. But everybody else did their job except for the offense. Manaea and the offense didn't do their job. Manaea's got to be better, right? They started you in game 162 because they paid you the big bucks. You were considered the ace. That was what's supposed to happen here, and it didn't happen. Like, yeah, my holy, but you know what? Nobody did shit. Nobody. Everybody, a lot of guys had chances today. Nobody did well. So look, Soda came up in a couple of spots. He did. But you know, Pete Alonso hit that rocket to left field. I mean, you can't hit a ball harder. Not his fault. At all. I mean, what are you supposed to do there? I mean, that game was over once the left fielder caught that ball. I think we all felt that. And my holy, it's fine. If you didn't want Soto, that's fine. It's fine. But that wasn't going to change David Stern's plan to not spend on starting pitching. Again, guys, I don't think we understand this too much. After May, the Mets offense was middle of the pack or better. And that was, even if you didn't have Soto, you know, Lindor had a really good season. Nimmo, if you look at the rest of the months, they had decent years. And decent years should have been enough. You had no chance with your pitching. No chance. And it was a perfect example of no chance from our pitching just based on who we had to start today. We had to start a guy who we paid $25 million to, who has a career 4 ERA, who pitched great for 4 months last year, and you rewarded him to tell him he's your ace and told Met fans and made Met fans believe that he's your ace. Yet you had an opportunity to get Garrett Crochet. You should have traded for Sandy Alcantara, who actually beat you in this series. The Mets only had to take 2 out of 3. They didn't have to do anything special here. The Reds lost. I mean, oh my God. Like, it was so perfect. The Mets gave up the 4 runs, and then all of a sudden the Brewers started to come back. And I'm like, they're going to win this game, aren't they? You know, 2 TVs going, watching both games. I'm like, look at this shit. The Brewers actually playing. They're actually playing well. They stopped them at 2 runs. A bunch of guys that just came back from injury, they were throwing to get some work in, and they're mowing them down. When I said the Reds are a bad team, they are. This is a game that they didn't have to do much, and they lost. And you know what? The Mets are a bad team too, but the Reds aren't a good team either. And now they're going to LA because they're going to get pummeled, just like we were probably going to get pummeled. But it's so amazing how quickly this game unraveled. It did not feel good. Like, I didn't trust Manaea at all. I just think that he just, I don't know. I just didn't feel like he had anything anyway. And I think Mendoza felt the same thing. Honestly, I'm not mad at Mendoza for taking him out. I'm not, like, I would have left him in. But how can you blame Mendoza leaving him in? The guy is not you can't trust him all year. And if he would have given up the runs, everybody would have killed him. Why didn't you take him out? You got everybody available in the bullpen. You know what? The Mets, after that, didn't give up any runs. You know, overall, you put up a ton of zeros the rest of the innings. Like, I mean, I don't know what else they're supposed to do. Like, if you, again, I'm going to go look at it really quickly. Like, Stanek was the culprit, right? I mean, it was what? It was 1-0. until in the third inning. Like it was Raley and it was Stanek. That was it. Brazaban came in, did his job. Diaz, Helsley, Soto. Excuse me. Whew, sorry, guys. Whew. Sorry about that. Whew. Yeah, everybody did their job. Like, the Mets couldn't score. That was it. It was 4 runs in the 4th inning. They had the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th. They had 5 more innings to score runs. And they had the first 3 to score runs to take a lead. Let's blame the offense in this game. Nobody did anything. It's unfortunate. It's sad. And it is the perfect ending to a season. Let's be honest about that. Yeah, and I agree. Alvarez, everybody can't – every game, I have to hear Gary Cohen and the blowing of Francisco Alvarez. I'm sorry with the language, but Jesus. Every time. Since Alvarez came back from the minor leagues, he's 900 OPS. Yeah, but he has at bats like that way too often when he doesn't hit. He swings that ball 4. I know he hit a big home run in Chicago. That's great. But you know what? That was far and few between. He basically was a singles hitter. That's what he was. Occasionally he'll hit a home run. Like he has those at bats that are just utterly a disaster. You can't swing at that pitch. This is the Mets all season. And you know what? This is not only this year. It was last year too. Even though they had a great run and their offense was good, they swung at a lot of stupid pitches. There's got to be, as a major leaguer, I'm sorry, if you play Little League, high school, travel ball, college, doesn't matter. You have to look fastball. You got to pick a zone and be ready for a fastball. You can't be looking for breaking balls. When you look for breaking balls, it already tells your mind that when you get a break, when you're looking for a breaking ball, you expect the breaking ball to be off the plate. That's what you usually expect. That's why a lot of guys knees buckle on breaking balls, because you're expecting something, but you're not expecting a breaking ball to be thrown for a strike more often than not. So why are you looking breaking ball? Because he was clearly looking for a breaking ball in that spot. His bat speed, it's not like he was, swing early on that pitch. He was right on that pitch. So that means he was looking for that pitch, but you should know better. I'd rather you get called looking at a strike 3 on a breaking ball. You know that curveball to Beltran? I'm not mad that he struck out on that pitch. It's a perfect breaking ball. That breaking ball wasn't supposed to be there. That was a hanging breaking ball. That was from Wainwright. That was a hanging breaking ball. Everybody killed Beltran for that. I wasn't mad. How am I mad at a guy that on a full count, with 2 strikes, you had a feeling you're going to be looking in the zone for a fastball, but you're probably expecting a curveball from Wainwright. But you're not expecting him to hang a curveball like that. You're expecting him to throw it in the middle of the zone and it drops and hits the dirt. That's what you were expecting. Same thing in this case. You can't be expecting that. I would rather you spit on breaking balls and off-speed pitches and look fastball. You shouldn't be looking at a fastball on the plate. If you would have struck out on that slider because it was perfect pinpoint on the outside corner, fine. That ball wasn't even close. You got to be better than that. And you know what? When you have these inexperienced, not good hitters, and Francisco Lindor is not a good hitter. He's not. Ronnie Mauricio can't hit a breaking ball. Luis Acuna can't hit. Vientos, 1 good month this year. These are all your young kids. Out of all the guys, Brett Beatty had the best year, and unfortunately, he got hurt. Not saying that Brett Beatty would have made a difference here, but it might have. You never know. Mauricio struck out a couple, didn't look good at a couple at bats. He wouldn't have been playing today if Brett Beatty was healthy. It's just pure nonsense. The at-bats are just so bad. The Jeff McNeil at-bat. What are you doing? He's another one. Jeff McNeil would never swing at that pitch 4 years ago, 3 years ago. It's just ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And Ron, if you believe they're gonna fire Stearns or Mendoza, because if they don't fire Stearns, which I don't believe they are, they're not firing Mendoza. I already told you what's gonna happen. Hefner's gone, Chavez is gone, and Barnes is gone. That's what's gonna happen. You know why? Because that's the scapegoats of the team. The manager is obviously numero uno, but those other guys are the scapegoats of the team. When fans want ahead, they'll get ahead, and they'll get those guys because that's usually the first ones that go. And that's what's going to happen. You can't keep Hefner after this year, not after the way his pitching was. And Chavez Barnes is going to get fired too. All three of them going to get fired. You're going to have a new pitching coach, a new hitting coach. But if you bring back a lot of the same pitchers, especially starting, I mean, I don't see anything that's going to be better here, honestly. It's an absolute joke, guys. I just don't understand how easily the Mets went down in this game. I don't. Oh man, it was like it was a slow death the whole season, and in this game, it was a slow pain. And then when the Brewers took the lead, and inning by inning, it kept on. The Brewers were up still by two, and I'm like, come on, guys, come on, do something, like make it exciting, like at least make it a game. You can't even do that. Yeah, Dolo, the Brewers helped us out. Like we were more confident that the Brewers would lose than the Mets would lose. Like I think if I should have put that poll up there. I think more people thought the Brewers would lose, but the Mets would win because it would just be perfect harmony in that situation. I don't think a lot of people thought it was going to be the other way around. I don't think a lot of people would have said yes, the Reds are going to lose today. And then once again, it's the Marlins again, taking 2 out of 3, ending the Mets season, 07, 08, 2025. It just cannot get any more poetic than what just happened. It's poetic. I mean, this is a fucking movie. Like, if this was an ending to a movie, like, just pull a Soprano. Just let the TV go black. Like, it's a perfect movie. It really is. I don't know, man. I don't know, guys. Wolverine has nothing to do with the Marlins playing in spring training. You know why the Mets play a lot of the same teams in spring training? Because they're on the east coast of Florida, where 90% of the teams now are on the west coast of Florida. That's the reason why you play the Marlins a lot, the Astros a lot, the Nationals a lot. It just is what it is. That has nothing to do with it. You shouldn't be losing 2 teams down the stretch. Again, you take 1 game from the Nationals, and you win a series against the Nationals, take 2 out of 3. Then you beat the Cubs 2 out of 3. I mean, you beat the Padres. You beat the Cubs 2 out of 3. And all you had to do was probably win 1 game in a series at that point. Like, and of course the Yankees are gonna mock Juan Soto and Met fans. Of course they are. And you know what? They're allowed to. Why not? They made the playoffs without Juan Soto. Juan Soto is going home on September 28th. What comeback am I going to have with them? Regardless if the Yankees go deep into the playoffs or not, they can lose in a wild card round. They still play 3 more games than us, or at least 2 more games. Like, I don't know, guys. I'm just annoyed at the fact that the New York Mets came to play a baseball game. Again, they played a perfect game yesterday. Great pitching, clutch hitting, and they did everything right. No bad mistakes on defense. And they come back and they can't pitch at all. they just can't do it. Yeah, they didn't come to play. Like it looked like the Mets played like they expected the Reds to win easily. That's the way they expected it. Because obviously the game wasn't in their hands until they got the final outs in the bottom of the eighth against the Marlins to get out of that inning to keep the 4 runs. That was when the Brewers lost. The Reds lost, excuse me. They were playing that game like they felt like they expected the Reds to win, and it didn't matter what they did. And you know what? They got a rude awakening when it was already the 5th inning on both games, and the Brewers were winning 4-2. Then all of a sudden they looked like they were trying all of a sudden. Did you feel that in the game where, like, in the middle of the game when the Brewers went ahead and the Marlins were up 4-0, all of a sudden you see the better at bats. You see them working counts. Oh, look at that. Oh, look, playing better. Oh, look at that. You see the energy. They get a walk. They're pumping their fists at the dugout. Let's go. Like, where was that in the first 3 innings? What did I tell you guys? What did I tell you? I told you that the Reds aren't any good. I said on the pregame, I said to you guys, get runs early. First 2 innings, you got to get runs early, put the pressure on the Reds. And there was no pressure on the Reds, and they still lost. Imagine if you would have scored runs in the first couple of innings. I think the Reds would have been shot. Done. It is an absolute shit show. They couldn't even salvage their opportunity that they got back from the grace of God from the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers who could have easily just sat down, relaxed, and let the Reds win a ball game. But you know what? That is their division rival. They played with mostly their benches, and they took care of their own business. They won their franchise record in over with they many ones in their franchise history. Great, good for them, and they couldn't do it. They could not come back, and they're 0-70 to end the season, trailing after 8 innings. And I know Gary Cohen was trying to spin a positive that it would be fitting that all year they could not come back trailing after 8 innings, and they would do it in game 162 to get them into the playoffs. That ended quickly, huh? And double play by Francisco Lindor ends the game. It would have been more fitting if Juan Soto would have hit a double into a double play to end the game. That would have been more fitting. That would have put more fuel to the fire. But it was a slow death of 4 months. They couldn't get out of their own way. The offense picked it up ever since July. They were really good. August was their best month offensively. They were the hottest team offense in baseball in August. They were actually pretty good in July. September, they were solid, but their pitching was just terrible. They're last in almost every category. The pitching was just dead last in almost every category. Like, you can't have that. You can't have that. And, I don't know what Mendoza was supposed to do with the pitching staff. I really don't. Like, there was no, like, who are you going to? The one guy you did trust was David Peterson prior to the kids coming up. And then he looked like he ran out of gas. This is the first time David Peterson threw that many innings in back-to-back years since he's been up with the Mets. And that is coming off a hip surgery. So that is another, check mark for the bullshit that David Stearns spilled to us in his propaganda. I will never get away from that. His propaganda is exactly why Met fans are mad at this situation, because they were a lot of the Met fans that were talking about this goddamn pitching staff. Oh, best pitching staff since in the first 2 months, best ERA, best pitching staff in baseball, all that, and it slowly got worse, and that was the downfall of this team. Go figure. In the playoffs, the pitching ended up being the downfall later in the playoffs for the New York Mets. So what do? You bring back Manaea, who is a guy who completely changes mechanics. And I'd love for everybody, since the season's over, you ain't watching no Met games. If you weren't there in the beginning of the year, if you weren't there during the Mets hot stove shows in the offseason, during the winter meetings, I must have did about 40 hot stove shows, maybe more. There was probably not one time I did not talk about the Mets and Manaea. I said that with these mechanic changes, he's going to get hurt. I said that. I believe that, because it wasn't just, I just moved over to another side of the rubber on the pitching mound. No. He completely changed his delivery, his mechanics that he's done his entire career. Past the age of 30, where his body is so accustomed to throwing one way that he dipped his body and his arm angle to completely change his mechanics and his delivery mid-season last year. And everybody just assumed that when your body goes through a very big change, throwing as hard as you can, as long as you can, and twisting your wrist and all that fun stuff, that he was just going to come out of this healthy. I mean, it's simple science. It's science 101. These guys are a creature of habit. They're a creature of habit with their body. Doing something dramatically different and doing it from the middle of the season last year, all the rest of the season, pitching more innings than he's had in a while. And you think he's just going to be the same pitcher and just be lights out and not be injured? I think that was a terrible, I would say not plan, but a terrible observation of what you needed to do in free agency or in the offseason, when you had opportunities to get an ace of the staff and not pay Manaea $25 million. He might have deserved it, quote unquote, because of what he did for the Mets. But don't we always complain for rewarding guys for what you did before and what you might do for me in the future? Wasn't that the topic of conversation throughout baseball for years, that too many guys used to get paid for what they did prior to signing their big contract, and you don't get paid what you might do in the future? That is, in a perfect scenario, what you got from Manaea. He's a guy who has a career 4 ERA, and you paid him to be a top 2 starter. And technically your ace. And we do know, again, that the mastermind in David Stearns is not as smart as he looks. It's just obvious. Because you can't survive in your rotation with reclamation projects and guys who've been good for only 1 year, and put a rotation together like that with nobody you can trust. I went back to this day one. I says specifically, this entire rotation is a question mark. There is not one guy I trust. And I know nobody's going to say it in the chat because a lot of you were there during the offseason when this roster was complete, right before spring training, I said, I don't trust this rotation. I think it's a big question mark. There's not one guy you can trust. You got Griffin Cannon, a guy who had a career 5 ERA, 4.5 ERA with the Angels, not really a good pitcher. You brought in Frankie Montas, who is a back-end rotation guy who you were trying to get innings for you. That was a disaster. Trusting David Peterson coming back after hip surgery and pitching as many innings as he did and expect him to be okay. Kodai Senga, who everybody told me is great and is really good. And I heard that all the way until 2 months ago. And then Sean Manaea is ace. So Sean Manaea, who hasn't been good probably since early Oakland days. Kodai Senga, who has not been good since 2023 with no pressure. Didn't pitch last year until, playoffs, which is perfect time to use him, by the way. And then they told you that, Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, what's better than that? You know what's better than that? Trading for Garrett Crochet. Trading for Sandy Alcantara. Signing better pitchers. There was a Max Fried out there. Right? For all the people that says, you wanted to sign Corbin Burns. He got hurt. Sean Manaea got hurt. But both of those guys were healthy when they were signing those contracts. So, oops. I mean, Sean Manaea, he barely pitched too. So, and yeah, we'll get to Senga. Don't worry about that, guys. We'll definitely get to Senga. If Senga is on this team next year, I don't know if I can handle it. I might blow my lid. I'm telling you right now. Because I cannot. Kodai Senga quit on this team. There was no talk about injury when he got sent down to the minors. It was about working on his mechanics or whatever he was trying to work at. I still don't know what he's trying to work out. I don't even think the Mets know. He was there the final three weeks of the season. And your number 2, or if you talk to some people, your ace was not hurt, but couldn't pitch the final week of the season. Why? I don't care if he's throwing 93 miles an hour. Get his ass out there. This is a guy that you told me that we can trust at the top of our rotation. They trusted Manaea, who was terrible this year after coming back from injury, but they brought him back for 162. So why didn't Kodai Senga come back the last week of the season when we needed every arm available? He wasn't hurt. It is an absolute joke. And you know what? I completely blame the Mets because they babied this guy. They gave him everything he wanted. They never pitched him on short rest, maybe twice in his career as a New York Met over 3 years. He's not good enough when he's on the mound. And this year was a perfect example of the teams around the league finally figuring him out. Because everybody's like, when Kodai Senga got hurt, by June 13th, that was when everything changed. Okay, you want to say that? Okay, fine. He came back by the All-Star break. But he faced a lot of different teams in those first couple of months. Once teams seen him again, they completely got the book on him. He never throws the ghost fork for a strike. It's rare. 73% of the time he throws his ghost fork, it's out of the strike zone. It is his strikeout pitch, but he throws it way too often in non-strikeout counts where batters are just laying off of him. And he was always the guy who put people on base. Always the guy who put people on base when it came to walks or when he gave up hits. He found ways to get out of a lot of those jams, but that is a recipe for disaster. Once you continue to put runners on all the time, it is eventually going to burn you. And with Kodai Senga, who doesn't have a sneaky fastball, his fastball is very straight. When they don't have to worry about the ghost fork pitch, they would rather strike out on a ghost fork pitch that actually hits the zone than swing at that pitch. So what are they waiting for? They're waiting for the fastball. And his fastball is way too straight. It has no movement. And that's what they did ever since he came back. The teams that seen him for a second, third time weren't fooled by it. Just like nobody ever knew what the hell he was doing in 2023 because nobody ever saw him. And we always go back to that, right? Everybody talks about Rob. Why do you always talk about history? Yet people could not wait to tell me about Kodai Senga in 2023. Or for the first couple of months, all season, into the offseason, and last year as well. The fact that that happened is not shocking. And that pitching lab, I'm great it was successful. For who? The other team. We didn't hear about the pitching lab. We heard it until May, and that was it. You know, what do they shut it down? Too much money? It's a joke. Absolute joke. You have the gift from the baseball gods having the Reds lose. And this is the beauty, and the one thing baseball actually did right was play all the games at the same time. Because this could have easily been a night game for the Mets. Or somebody playing, and you know what? The Mets would have played an hour ahead because they're playing in Milwaukee, who is an hour early, or hour back, excuse me. So we would have played an hour ahead of them, regardless of what time the Mets would have played, night or day game, and you would have had an hour to do what you needed to do. But unfortunately, yeah, Thomas, I agree. 18 games over 500. They were at 1.21 games over 500. You can't miss the playoffs. And here you go. The New York Mets missed the playoffs in 7 of their last 9 years. Exciting, right? 7 of the last 9 years. Not good. Again, you're going to talk about history when history repeats itself. That's when I bring up history. I don't bring up history because I want to torment myself and you guys about the misery we've lived. And some of us lived in more misery than others. Rob, is Explosive, is this worse than 07? Let me see if I can click at the comments finally. Hold on one second. Let me just get the super chat. And of course, Adam behind me. I mean, that's funny. Haha. But thank you for the super chat, though. Sorry, here we go. Hold on. Was this worse than 07? It's very similar, just different scenarios, right? I don't know. It's close. Because in that case, it was with 7 with 17 to play. That was like this was a slow death. That 7 with 17 to go was rather quick. It was like a 2-week stretch. So it happened like that. And I don't know, man. It's hard. That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm going to put that poll up later tonight. So check on YouTube on my community page later and keep those notifications on because I'm going to post a poll. Which is worse, the 2025 Mets or the 07? The 2025 choke of the Mets or the 2007 choke of the Mets? I don't know. I think it would be close, but it's hard because it's recency bias, right? There's more people that are so pissed off right now that they're going to choose 2025 just because it's right. They have a bad taste in their mouth right now. If I ask a month from now, it might be a little bit different. I don't, you know what? I'm going to, let me think for a second. I'm really trying to pinpoint because, well, I was young. How old was I? I don't remember. Jesus Christ. What was that? 20, let's say 18 years ago, right? Yeah, 18 years ago. Yeah, I was just going to college, right? Well, probably high school. Yeah, it was just starting college. Yeah. So I don't know, man. You know what? I didn't really like the 07 team. I always had that. I did not like the Tom Glavine signing. Signing a career Brave who tormented us for years I just never felt right. I loved Wright. I love Reyes. Obviously that team with Delgado, Beltran, all those guys. I would have to say 07. The only reason why is because 06, we were that close, this was a totally different team than last year. 07, the 06 team was very similar to the 07 team. Like a lot of your best guys were on that team the next year. In this scenario, you basically lost most of your rotation. Your entire bullpen was different for the most part. You brought in Juan Soto. You really didn't have a center fielder. I'm going to have to go with 07 because it was the same team mostly the same team for 06. Obviously a little different, but this seemed like a more different team. It was a different bench, different bullpen, different rotation. You lose Severino, you lose Quintana, you replace that with Griffin Cannon and Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas. It's totally different. Making it to the NLCS, you shouldn't be losing that many people. But that was the problem with last year. Why the Mets, it was kind of a worst case scenario for the Mets. Obviously, it was fun in the moment, but David Stern set up that team to have a massive trade deadline to be sellers. That was the unfortunate part with last year because he clearly set up to trade and be sellers at the deadline last year. And maybe that would have benefited us more because you could have even made your farm system even better. And yeah, we wouldn't have had a fun season last year, but sometimes it actually might hurt your future because of what happened last year. But I always say this, I don't think you can give up years. Years like last year is wasted because you weren't aggressive enough to get what that team actually needed. That team was basically like the offense was clicking. The starting pitcher was really damn good. You only needed a bullpen arm or two and a starting pitcher. And you needed more this year in a year you spent a ton of money on your offense. And you still needed a lot at the deadline when it came to rotation and bullpen. Last year, you probably needed 2 bullpen arms and a starter. This year, you needed basically a whole bullpen and a starter. So I just think that half-assing the deadline is more of the problem than anything else. The Mets were still in a very good spot come trade deadline. They counted on Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga coming back as additions, like a trade deadline addition. And you can't do that. There's nothing in the rule book saying you can't make your team better, even though the guys that are supposed to be at the top of your rotation are coming back. You have to. I always say this, and I don't understand why front offices don't do this. When guys are injured, especially they're injured for a long period of time, like Sean Manaea in the first half, and Kodai Senga goes down a month before the deadline, and Griffin Cannon goes down the same month that Kodai Senga went down. Griffin Cannon is not coming back. Sean Manaea, you had no idea. He was even going through things, even when he was going through rehab. They pushed. Remember, he had to pitch another rehab because he felt something. Like, I always say this. If a guy is out that long, I can't confidently say I can trust him coming back and being the guy that I believe he can be. It's nothing against the pitcher. It's just common sense. You needed to have a backup plan just in case. David Stearns didn't even bring in one starting pitcher. Like, even if you would have brought in a middle of the road starting pitcher, maybe that would have at least calmed the waters a little bit in your rotation. And maybe you get quality starts from that guy that you weren't getting from anybody. Maybe. It wasn't just about getting the top guy at the trade deadline. He didn't bring nobody at all. That is such a bad job. When you did what you needed to do at the for your bullpen. Now, you can't predict that Helsley's going to be terrible. You can't predict that Gregory Soto is going to fall apart at the end of the season. And Tyler Rogers was, I would say, above average. Not great, but above average. You can't predict those guys who all of them, at least Rogers and Helsley, have a good track record. So nobody hated that trade. Like, personally, coming to the Mets, just what they would possibly do for the Mets, we were all okay with Helsley. We were all okay with getting Rogers as a good bullpen arm. Now, people didn't like what we gave up, but we ultimately liked the player in this bullpen. And Gregory Soto was outstanding the first couple of weeks we got him. So doing that still wasn't enough. And everybody knew it. Some didn't say it. I mean, I was arguing with people for days during the last couple of days of the trade deadline. Why would you trade for Alcantara? He's having a bad season. Why do you want him? Well, because he beat the Mets twice in a month. Those two games would have mattered, clearly. And I'm not saying that Alcantara would have came here and made the difference. But you're going to tell me that times when Manaea and Kodai Senga were shit in the bed, that Sandy Alcantara couldn't have stepped into one of those guys' spots and win 2 more games for us? Because all we needed, guys, was 84 wins to make the playoffs. 84 wins to make the playoffs. Let me repeat myself. The New York Mets needed 84 wins to make the playoffs. And you're going to tell me that not anybody they brought in here as a starter, if it was middle rotation a guy or somebody given that couldn't give a better quality start than the bullshit we see from Manaea and Kodai Senga, or the openers we got from Davinsky and Waddell, and at times Brazaban, come on, guys. Here's the problem. David Stearns half-assed the deadline, just like Billy Epler did, just like Brody Van Wagenen did, and just like Sandy Alderson did for years until that one time at Kodai Senga. And even then, he had to wait until the final minutes of a deadline to get the bat they needed. You cannot half-ass deadlines and just expect everything to be okay. And you know what? Not enough Met fans were mad at that. I was the one mad. Everybody was so happy. Oh my God, we didn't trade out young pitchers. Great. Wonderful. How did that work out for us, guys? How did that work out? There was way too many people too okay with what the Mets did not do at the deadline because you didn't want to trade prospects yet again. Well, you know what? You got Ronnie Mauricio. You got Luis Acuna. You got Mark Vientos. You got Brett Beatty. You got McLean. You got Tong. You got Sproat. Congratulations with your 83 wins and missing the playoffs. Thank you, Met fans. Because guess what? A lot of you did not want to trade those guys. And you lived in your bed. So all the people that got mad, why you want to trade these young guys? Why you want to trade these prospects? You know why? Because none of them are proven, and I want proven talent in here. I trust Sandy Alcantara. I trust Garrett Crochet. I'll trust any other guy that has proved it in the major league level over a top prospect every single time. You know why? Because prospects are suspects. And if you're a Mets fan, you should know better because more often than not, it doesn't work out. Give me the proven guy. But Mike, see, it's not about acting like we made the decision. It's not about you making this. I'm not saying you made the decision. Too many people are way too happy that they didn't trade these prospects and they didn't make those trades. Everybody was way too okay with the deadline. Yet, the same people that are complaining today about Mauricio looking lost and Acuna being lazy and Vientos being a shell of himself from last year and Tong not ready, Sproat kind of 50-50 not ready, and McLean pretty good, but ultimately wasn't enough. That's the problem. And you know what? This is the Mets fans too that are way too worried about their prospects. And David Stearns got away with basically murder at that deadline because there was way too many Mets fans were like, wow, I like this move. Wow, I like that. Yeah. All right, we didn't really like Cedric Mullins. And, you went from Harrison Bader, Luis Robert, and Cedric Mullins. We all knew who was the last one on that list. It was Cedric Mullins. And that's who you got. Why was that? Because David Stearns went the cheap route, got the worst of the three players, and there you go. And that's what happened. Yeah, Lindor with the watery eyes. That's nice. He can cry himself to sleep, but he can just look at his bank account and he'll be all right. He can go home to his wonderful kids and his wife. Like, I don't care. Like, where was this teary-eyed bullshit and this anger 3 weeks ago when you were falling apart at the seams? Yeah. And you know what, Explosive? Pete Alonso has 5. Right? 2019 was a choke. We all know what happened there. They were outstandingly hot and got back into the race in August, and they collapsed. Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff Peniel was a part of that. 2020, I mean, that was a weird year. I'm not going to blame anybody for that. I kind of skipped that year. 2001 was Lindor's first year. I mean, Pete Alonso was well-established. Nimmo was well-established. McNeil was well-established. They didn't do anything. 2022, they had a great year. They fell apart in September. That was year number 2 for Lindor. 23, everybody was here. Last year, everybody was here too. But they ultimately failed at their goal. And how many more times do we have to deal with high expectation years becoming a complete failure? Like, the high expectations aren't going away. It's Juan Soto can opt out for another 4 years. Like, why are we talking about 4 years? See, this is the Mets problem. This is the Mets fans' problem. And not only do you believe the propaganda bullshit that David Stearns spills you and gives you about the future and sustained success, that's where he gets Mets fans, right? He grabs you and pulls you in. Right? You guys have got to be smarter than that. I know you guys are. But you fall for this shit. Because, again, why was he the first executive on a TV screen having a post-trade deadline interview 30 minutes after the trade deadline? Who does that? He knew he fucked up at the deadline. That is why he could not wait to tell you, Tyler McGill, I'm great Tyler McGill pitched for us again. Talked about the young pitchers. Couldn't wait to bring those guys up. Couldn't wait. The first 3 minutes of the interview talked about Tyler McGill and Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat. Not really Jonah Tong, but he basically brought all 3 of them up, basically saying how good they're pitching in the minors. Told you all about Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea being a big part of this. So the propaganda is beautiful, right? It sounds good coming out of his mouth, but ultimately it's all bullshit because he knew he didn't finish the job. He didn't do the right thing. I don't think he felt good. I think he realized it. He had an opportunity to get a Joan Duran. He had an opportunity to get Sandy Alcantara. He had an opportunity to get Gary Crochet in the offseason. He didn't even bring a starting pitcher in here. Like, at all. What was the Mets' biggest problem? They were starting pitching all year, except for 2 months. We played 6 months. So 4 out of the 6 months, the pitching was basically garbage. Well, Drifter, you know what the answer is? If David Stearns is here, Mendoza's going to be here. I already told you who the scapegoats are, and I know you're just possibly tuning in. I already said who the scapegoats are. Tomorrow is obviously, they're going to travel back to New York. Maybe they'll have a season ending interview session on Monday, maybe, or Tuesday. I don't know. Let's do it on the day playoffs start because it make everybody just feel great. The scapegoats are going to be Hefner, Barnes, and Chavez. The 2 hitting coaches and the pitching coach. You know why? Because they are the scapegoats of every team. Every team. When things go wrong. It shuts up the Met fans for a little while. Because everybody's going to be, oh, thank God they're gone. And yet, the one guy who is the absolute number one on the list of problems is David Stearns. Because he could not wait to spend as little as possible on a rotation and a bullpen. His plan always is to spend as little money as possible on pitching. That's what he's known for. That is what he does. It has nothing to do with, he was in a small market in Milwaukee. He knew he didn't have to spend money. So no fan is going to bitch and moan, hey, spend money to bring in this top line starting pitcher. He didn't have to worry about that. But now that you have money, you spent it poorly, the limited amount of money you did. And you didn't actually go out there and get what you needed at the deadline as well. You didn't get a trade. If you didn't want to spend the money, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll get on board with that a little bit. But Garrett Crochet was out there for a trade. Right? You remember that hot stove? Couple of shows with Garrett Crochet. All I heard was he didn't pitch that many innings. He was basically a reliever. How can you trust somebody who hasn't thrown that many innings? Come on, guys. Yeah, but more people were okay with Clay Holmes, who didn't throw that many innings. With Frankie Montas, who was garbage. With Griffin Cannon. Like, that's the problem. You would have got a young kid, 26, 27 years old, that you could have extended for much cheaper than you would have gave Corbin Burns, Max Fried, and they were young. He was younger than them, the guys. Sandy Alcantara was even younger than those guys. And you could have traded for him at the trade deadline. You feel that every opportunity you had, you could have just spent money to bring in a top-line starter. Again, the argument with Corbin Burns does not work when Sean Manaea also got hurt. Because you also paid Sean Manaea when he was quote-unquote healthy. Just like Corbin Burns was healthy when he signed that contract. But here's what I know, guys. This is what I know. Who do you have more confidence in? Corbin Burns coming back next year and pitching? Or Sean Manaea coming back pitching and pitching good? You know who I think who's going to pitch well? Corbin Burns, not Sean Manaea. You know why? Because Corbin Burns has a track record of being damn good. Sean Manaea doesn't. So I'll take a guy who comes off Tommy John to come back and pitch well and help my team win than a guy like Sean Manaea, where in year number 2 of a $25 million a year contract, he's probably going to have surgery to remove those loose bodies. God knows what else is wrong with him. We'll probably hear something else was wrong with him too. And you know what? Just throw Kodai Senga in surgery as well, because you might as well do something to him so he can have another excuse. That is what I heard all off season. I didn't want to trade. They didn't want to trade for Sandy Alcantara, right? A lot of people were saying that. I don't want to trade for Sandy Alcantara. Look at his numbers. All right. He had pretty good second half numbers. Not one Mets pitcher had second half numbers like he did. And he beat us twice in the process. You could have avoided that by getting him. And oh, by the way, you have him for the next couple of years. So you want to talk about sustained success and future? You have him for the next couple of years, including the rest of this year. Now, you fail to make the playoffs. Now Pete Alonso is going to opt out. Edwin Diaz is going to opt out. You have your entire bullpen free agents. So you got to sign like 6 guys in your bullpen because everybody's a free agent because that's what Stearns does. So not only do you got to work on your rotation, and this is why I don't think David Stearns is going to work on a rotation because he's got to worry about signing about 6 guys in the bullpen, including your closer. Because who's a free agent? Raleigh, Rogers, Helsley, Soto, Stanek, Diaz, Minter. That's basically your entire bullpen. So right now, you got Dylan Ross. All right. Yeah. Woohoo. Exciting, guys. So you got to sign an entire bullpen this offseason. The conversations are going to start tomorrow about, well, Pete Alonso is still officially a Met until he actually opts out, which he can't do until after the World Series is over, but he's opting out. He had a great year. Pete Alonso is going to be a free agent. You got Diaz opting out. He's going to opt out as well. So you got to find about 6 guys to your bullpen. The conversations are going to start about Pete Alonso. And we should be talking about starting rotation. But I know what's going to happen. Everybody's going to say, well, we got the kids. You got Nolan McLean. You got Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga. That's the nonsense we're going to hear. I trade every single guy I need to get the best starting pitcher on the market to trade for. If Nolan McLean wants to be untouchable, if you want to make him untouchable, I'm fine with that. But Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, Ewan, Santucci, I don't give a shit. Jet Williams, Ryan Clifford, Carson Benj, I don't care. You see what happens when pitching gives you no chance. You can't win enough ball games. At almost the end of the game, they showed the average since June and the numbers where the Mets offense was above average, middle of the pack or better since June. And they're more than good enough offensively to win more ball games. The pitching gave you no chance. Yeah, my holy, wonderful. I love. I was damn shocked that Clay Holmes gave us a great game yesterday. But how many more times do we have to see a guy pitch great in game 161 and pitchers fall short in game 162? John Maine, the game of his life, game 161. And it's fitting, right, that a veteran pitcher that we brought in here, one well past his prime in Tom Glavine, and Sean Manaea, nowhere near his best than he was in Oakland, pitched game 162. And you could say the same thing for Tom Glavine. He was done after 2. Similar to what Sean Manaea was, similar after 1 2/3. Nobody deserves to come back here. Honestly. I clean the whole slate, right? Let Alonso walk. Like, I don't know why people are mad. The same people who didn't want to trade anybody in their farm system are going to get exactly what you wished for. You think David Stearns signing Pete Alonso? You're out of your mind. I'm telling you this right now, guys. I would be shocked if Jet Williams or Carson Bench is playing center field for your New York Mets. I would be shocked if Ryan Clifford is not playing first base for your New York Mets. Yeah, explosive. I didn't want gimmicks. Gimmicks are useless. What does gimmicks do? It makes you feel like this team is better than they are. And what happens is you get way too excited about last year and everybody forgets about the future. Because we all knew with all these one-year deals that we had last year, the team is going to look a lot different. And it did. Basically, entire different bullpen, mostly guys different in the rotation. And that's what happens. And no, it's not about a rebuild. It's not about a rebuild. But you won 83 games this year with the numbers most of your big guys put up. You had a 30-30 season from Lindor. You had the most home runs Nimmo has ever hit. You had a 40-plus home run Juan Soto, a 38 home run Pete Alonso, and you won 83 games. So don't tell me we can't lose with those guys because we just did. We just did this year. You got to change something. And Diaz, quote, I love this organization and I'd love to come back. Well, you know what? You got to lock David Stearns in a room and talk to Steve Cohen. Because if it's up to David Stearns, he's bringing back Ryan Helsley. You know why? Because Ryan Helsley is probably, as bad as he was for the Mets, is probably going to get a 1 or 2 year deal. And that is right up David Stearns' alley. So don't be surprised, guys. Again, your genius, who everybody wanted in David Stearns. And I also want you guys to go check. When I did a live, when they signed David Stearns to be the president of baseball operations, right? I was like, okay. It was an obvious move. They were going to make it. We know Steve Cohen wanted him for years. We knew he was going to be the guy once he got away from the Brewers. So it wasn't shocking that they got him. But I said this during the live. This is a guy who has not won. This is a guy, and they talked about it on the broadcast. Like, if you listen to the Reds broadcast during the Brewers game, and I did. They were talking about, the Brewers constantly get knocked out of the first round basically every year. Wild card or in the NLDS. Every year they get knocked out in their first round. Except for one time they got to the NLCS. Other than that, they've been getting knocked out in the first round. Year after year after year after year. A lot of that was with David Stearns. So to put him on this pedestal like he did something beautiful and great, when the ultimate goal should be to win a World Series, not to have sustained success, because those two words are so annoying. Because his sustained success, in his mind, is what he did with the Brewers. Make the playoffs 7 out of 8 years. I think in his case, it was 6 out of 8 years in his time in Milwaukee. That's sustained success, losing in the first round every year. And everybody's like, well, it'd be better than what the Mets are doing when they lost. They missed the playoffs 7 out of the last 9 years. Sure. But in a big market, that might be cute and fun for a small market in Milwaukee, making the playoffs every year, right? They're not going to go crazy because you're making the playoffs in a small market. But in New York, I mean, don't we see that with the Yankees? They make the playoffs every year, but They haven't won a World Series in nearly 15 years or 15 years. Dude, do you think Yankee fans are caring that they just made the playoffs? Because if they get knocked out in the playoffs without a World Series, are you going to tell Yankee fans, hey, you made the playoffs, be happy? That gets stale rather quickly. If you make the playoffs and continue to lose, nobody's going to care of your sustained success. You got to win the World Series. That is the goal. And unfortunately, I think the only way David Stearns would be happy with a World Series is if he does it exactly how he wants it. He was not going to deviate. Like, do you think all of a sudden, now, in a perfect example, in 2021, the Mets had a really rough season. What did they go out there and do? They spent big on their pitching because that was a problem. And again, you traded for Chris Bassett. You still had Jacob deGrom. You got Max Scherzer. In a year where high expectations come to a screeching halt and fail to make the playoffs and have 83 wins with a massive number one payroll, the next year, you go big. And you don't let nothing get past you. All the holes that you supposedly didn't fill, you fill. You can't nitpick on certain things. You see that all the time with teams that have high expectations, don't make the playoffs, and make big moves in the offseason. Does anybody believe that David Stearns is going to go do that and deviate from his ultimate plan? I don't. But that's what we have right now. We got a GM, president of baseball ops, that told us he's thinking about, he was going to hire a GM. Remember when he first got hired? That didn't happen because he loves power. You had to have your owner jump in the Pete Alonso negotiations because David Stearns clearly wasn't going to do it. And you had David Stearns basically be on the back burner of the Juan Soto negotiations. So this is a guy that everybody says is the genius who basically took a step back on Pete Alonso and Juan Soto where the owner had to step in to finish deals. But, you don't need Steve Cohen to sign Frankie Montas or Griffin Cannon or Sean Manaea or Clay Holmes. Bring back Ryan Stanek. Sign A.J. Minter. You don't need Steve Cohen to do that. You don't have to wake him up in the middle of the night to call. David Stearns is the problem. If you don't believe... Oh, look, Kodai Senga is talking. Let's listen. I want to listen to Kodai Senga. Hold on, guys.
Back to where you wanted to be.
Let's listen.
何を探っていたんですか？何が見つからなかったんですか？
やっぱり、怪我をして以降、自分の体を思うように動かなくなったっていうのはすごい強く感じましたし、それの結果出てしまった部分もあって、なかなか最後の方は苦しいシーズンでしたし、1ヶ月は役に立たなかったってところはやっぱりいろいろ思うところあるかなと思います。
I think it comes down to my body. I wasn't able to control my body the way I wanted it to after that injury, and unfortunately that showed up in the results on field too, and very disappointing that I wasn't able to contribute in that last month or so.
Where do you feel like you go from here? How do you get that back this offseason?
感覚を戻すっていうのはこのオフどういうふうな取り組みをしていきたいと思ってますか？
やっぱり自分の体っていうところに対して、また一から作り直す気持ちでやりたいなと思いますし、前は良かったとか、そういうふうに求めるんじゃなくて、またこれで、怪我した後また体が変わってると思うので、そこに前向きに捉えていきながらしっかり 自分を強くして、いいパフォーマンスを来年出せるように、準備したいなと思います。
I want to rebuild from step one. My body's changed after this injury and after various things. My body has changed. So, not reflecting back on my body used to do this or used to do that. It's step one again. Head into the off season, come back strong next year.
What do you mean by your body has changed?
やっぱり怪我をするっていうことに関しては、怪我する前とやっぱちょっと違ってる部分があるので、そういう意味で今言いました。
Just when you get injured and after you come back from an injury, you're not the exact same as you were before. That's just what that means.
Have you done that kind of process before in your career?
キャリアの中でそのような、作り直すっていう工程を踏んだことありますか？
あまり日本の時は特になかったんですけど、こっちに来て、去年からそういうふうにリハビリで苦しい思いをする部分がやっぱあるので、そこに対して自分で、しっかり考えながら濃いオフを過ごせたらなと思ってます。
Yeah, for example, last year where I kind of ended the season often in injury, so I kind of had to do a similar thing. But if I can make the most of the time that I have in the off season, I can come back strong.
Do you feel like you let the team down?
Great question. The reporter asked, "Do you feel like you let the team down?"
後半の時にやっぱりうまくいいパフォーマンスを出せなかったところに関しては、いろいろ思うところありますし、後半自分でいろんな人と話し合いながら、今の僕が投げれるお金じゃないとか、チームの勝つ確率が高いっていうところに関しては、チームをもっと行動しながらというところと、後半そんな感じかなと思います。
Yeah, the latter half of the season, it was disappointing that I wasn't able to perform out there, and ultimately the decision came down to we think that somebody else pitching instead of me is going to help the team win, so that's what it kind of comes down to. And so yeah.
All right, guys. So that was Kodai Senga speaking bullshit. Again, he talked about his body not being the same after the hamstring, which again, it's a hamstring, guys. I mean, come on. I mean, it wasn't even a high grade hamstring, a hamstring injury. It was a low grade hamstring injury. I just like, and you know, I don't know who asked that question, but it was a woman reporter who asked that question. Do you feel like you let the team down? Obviously, he's not going to say no. I mean, he'd just be an idiot. Like, they would jump him before he even gets out of the clubhouse. But yeah, it was nonsense. I don't want to hear none of that. You were healthy. Your body wasn't the same coming back from injury. So why'd you ever come back after the hamstring, man? If that was so much of you not be able to feel like you're comfortable on the mound, then don't be on the mound. You can't let us lose games because you can't pitch well over and over and over again because, hello, guys, do we all forget? He was pitching in August and September. He pitched about 13, 14 starts after that. Oh, my God. This guy better not be on the team next year, guys. If Kodai Senga is on the team this year, I'm done with Davis. I'm completely done. There's a slimmer of hope in my back of my head for Davis Stearns deviating from his plan, but I don't believe it's true. But my God, like that's what I need to hear. This was a guy that was supposed to be a co-ace. And he was not available for this team. Sean Manaea wasn't with his best stuff, but at least he went out there. I give Sean Manaea a little bit of credit for being out there because he could have said the same nonsense. Oh, I just didn't feel the same after the injury. I felt like I couldn't put it all out there. I didn't feel hurt, but I feel like my body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. But Sean Manaea went out there when the Mets asked him to. He went out there when the Mets needed the pitcher. Now, he only pitched in 2/3, but I just feel like Mendoza just didn't trust him to get out of anything. it's just ridiculous. Kodai Senga cannot say that. You have to pitch. You're not injured. You're not injured. I don't care about you throwing 93 miles an hour on your fastball. Manaea was throwing 93 miles an hour on his fastball. But Manaea didn't make excuses. You know what Manaea said? I just didn't have it. When he pitched bad, I just didn't have it. I didn't pitch well. I didn't locate it. He didn't say anything about my body, my this, my that. Manaea went out there. When he failed, he took responsibility. Kodai Senga doesn't take any responsibility. That is a guy that everybody told me was an ace. So, my fans, live in that bed once again. Because a lot of you did that. So, Kodai Senga is a joke. Manaea just wasn't good this year. But at least he came back and pitched every time the Mets asked him to. Even though he didn't pitch well, he went out there. And I give him a little bit of credit for that. He never made excuses like Kodai Senga did. He didn't say my body this, my arm that, my loose elbows this. He never said that. He says I didn't locate, I didn't finish my pitches, and I didn't get guys out. That's what he always said. He said it again today. So I give him a little bit of credit for that. Big disappointment, but I give him a little credit for going out there every day. Kodai Senga actually quit on his teammates, on that team, on the fans that believed in him, whoever they are. Wasn't me. And yeah, Holmes gets a slight pitch. Like, I'm not blaming Clay Holmes. I'm shocked what he did this year. I'm surprised he survived. But Clay Holmes couldn't be a guy that was overly trusted in this rotation. He was not meant to be that. He was meant to be a number 4 and number 5. Work up his innings, get situated as a starter, and you can work with that as a 4th to 5th starter. But when you have to count on him to be your big-time star, one of your big-time starters, that's a problem. It's unfortunate that we have to see Kodai Senga basically give up on his team, because that's what it was. He backed out on his team. There's not one player that should want Kodai Senga back on that team. Not one. How can you bring him back? The guy did not show up when your team needed him the most. We just heard there was no injury. He just said about his body and that coming back from injury, my body just wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. What was it supposed to do? If you're hurt, tell the Mets that you're hurt. They can figure out something else. But you allow, here's the other problem. This is why I can't stand certain guys and what they do, especially Kodai Senga. He came back right before the deadline. 2 weeks before, he came back right before the All-Star break. 2 weeks before the deadline. Why would you just tell the Mets, listen, my body just doesn't feel right? Maybe it would have made a different story. And maybe Stearns would have been a little bit more aggressive than he actually was at the trade deadline, bringing in another starting pitcher. But you giving false hope to your organization doesn't make sense. That's so bad. You got a pitcher who is a co-ace, according to many people, including the Mets, by the way, that gave up on your team, that wasn't there when you needed them, wasn't injured, bitched about the heat in Florida, saying his body wasn't ready. This was supposed to be at the beginning, it was supposed to be, okay, go down to the minor leagues, fix what you need to fix in your one rehab start, and you're back up. All right, he pitched decent in his first rehab start, but the Mets were like, you know what? We'll give you one more just so you know you're good and fix what you needed to fix. Didn't pitch well. All of a sudden, he's still not there yet. He's going to throw a bullpen. What? And I blame mostly the Mets for this, because They allowed him to dictate what he wanted, he got. I can't pitch every 5th day. I need extra days off. I need this. I need that. I need this. I need that. Just to get onto the mound. Doesn't matter if you don't pitch well or not. I need all this to get onto the mound so I feel okay on the mound. How many guys at the end of the year feel 100%? Nobody. You don't think Clay Holmes got aches and pains? He battled yesterday. You don't think Sean Manaea elbow is probably burning right now? But you know what? He stepped up on the mound in game 162. At least he was there. At least Clay Holmes stepped on the mound yesterday prior to whatever he did. He was on the mound yesterday after throwing more innings than he ever did in his life in baseball. Yet, I got to hear that bullshit from Kodai Senga. No, Senga doesn't have a player option because he didn't pitch the amount of innings he was. If he threw enough innings, he would have that option. But why would he opt out? There's nobody going to give him more money than what the Mets are giving him right now. What is he getting? $15 million? Nobody's going to give him that. So he wouldn't opt out. So the Mets season is over. Once again, season over, choke complete, no playoffs. The Mets got the gift of the baseball gods. The Reds lost. And the New York Mets could not just get one more win. One more win, and they would have made the playoffs. They would have tripped, stumbled, did a barrel roll down the cliff into the playoffs. They end the season 83-79. Missing the playoffs, having a debacle, terrible, embarrassing 4 months after being 20 plus games over 500. At that time, having the best record in baseball and completely fallen apart. There's nothing else to say except they deserve every ounce of criticism. And that goes from the top of Steve Cohen and trickles down to David Stearns, trickles down to the manager, the coaches, and the players. You don't have this type of collapse over 4 months when you're well in a comfortable playoff spot, 20 games over 500, one of the best records in baseball in May or early June, and miss the playoffs and play so badly, have one of the worst records in baseball since June 13th. This was a complete team effort of failure. And the New York Mets are packing their bags and going home and get to watch the Major League Baseball playoffs in 2025 at home. While a bad Cincinnati Reds team takes your spot and goes to LA to play a wild card series where that should have at least been you. And you didn't deserve it. You didn't play well enough. There's no excuses. You played like shit. The New York Mets deserve every bit of this collapse and this criticism. And there better be heads rolling. There better be big time moves. There better be big changes, or you're going to see the same stuff over and over again. We should not be talking about a core that has failed year after year, collapsed in 2022, showed some signs of life in 2019, but ultimately choked down the stretch in September once they made a little bit of an effort in 2019 to get back in the playoff hunt. 2023, they choked and just had a terrible season and were sellers at the deadline. Last year, no expectations. All of a sudden, they figure out something. Another high expectation year, and they completely fall on their face. I want to thank everybody for watching the Mets postgame show, but ultimately, I want to thank everybody for watching the entire season on the pregame shows, postgame shows, lives on Mets Talk Live, night shows, midnight shows, everything this year. It was a complete roller coaster this year. It was hard to be a Met fan, which it usually always is. But I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. And I know Chris is going to say the same thing. He was unfortunately very, very busy in his life these last couple of weeks. Not his fault. It's just life. But I know Chris would say the same thing. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you guys for dealing with us, disagreeing with us, agreeing with us, and coming back every single time to hang out with us throughout the New York Mets 2025 season. Unfortunately, the season is over, and we have no more baseball and on-field talk to actually talk about on any show. The next show that will happen will probably be tomorrow. Probably be just a regular Mets Talk Live show, just to kind of put the finishing touches, the bow on this season, so to speak. You know, maybe I'll get a couple of guys on just to talk. Just to talk about the failures. So with that said, guys, the Mets in game 162, when everything ended up being in the Mets' favor, they lose 4-0 and go lifeless into the darkness in the 2025 baseball season. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to the channel, to Mets pregame, Mets postgame, Mets Talk Live, all the late night shows. I really do appreciate it, guys. I'll see you tomorrow for a Mets Talk Live to put a wrap onto this season. Once again, guys, Mets record 83-79, missing the playoffs in the final day of the year. And now the offseason begins for our New York Mets. Have a great night, guys. And I'll see you tomorrow on Mets Talk Live to put the final touches on this 2025 season. Good night, guys. And as always, thank you for watching.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell, give 'em a hand, and let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life.